So behind this stainless steel, there are patients.
One day it will be normal medicine. There's a huge potential for this to grow.
You know, I just want to yell at the entire world, don't you get it? You're going to die.
I actually did physically hold my father's brain in my hands.
The idea of reanimating heads or bodies in a century is wishful thinking.
I want to live until tomorrow, and tomorrow I'm going to want to live until the day after tomorrow, and I believe that this desire will continue indefinitely.
Welcome to the Oregon Cryonics ribbon cutting ceremony for our newly remodeled facility. We finally have a working clinic, a solid foundation for the future. This day's been a long time coming, and we're so glad to have you here to see it. Okay, let's get started with the ribbon cutting. 1, 2, 3.
Have you ever wondered what a room full of cryonicists looks like?
If anybody has mud on their feet of any kind, we have try to shake it off, or we have booties if there's too much.
In Salem, Oregon, we were on hand for the opening of the newest Cryonics Institute in the U.S.
I can do this all day.
Cryonics is the practice of storing a recently deceased person at low temperatures in the hopes that they can live again when future technology enables them to be healed and reanimated.
This is what we would use out in the field.
I've come here to see what the buzz is about, and to see if freezing people and then reanimating them decades or centuries in the future is scientifically feasible.
How'd you feel about cutting that ribbon?
I really have been working hard for this. We'll be the third cryonics company. Hopefully we'll have as many patients as the others someday. This is just a barely functional facility right now. There is so much more we could do.
Like many scientific innovations, cryonics has its roots in science fiction. In 1931, sci-fi pulp magazine Amazing Stories published the Jameson satellite. It told the tale of a professor who, driven by an obsession with preserving his body, after death, shot himself into the deep freeze of outer space. 40 million years later, he's revived by an alien race who've achieved immortality by transplanting their brains into mechanical bodies. The story planted a seed in the mind of a young Robert Ettinger in 1962. Obsessed with low-temperature preservation of the human body, he self-published the book The Prospect of Immortality. Popular sci-fi writer Isaac Asimov put his support behind the book, which led to international publication and fame for Ettinger. In its wake, organizations and companies began to take shape, and the cryonics movement was born. In the Arizona desert, Alcor has been the leading cryonics organization for years. We're at the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. We're going to see over 130 patients who are frozen in the middle of the desert.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I met with Dr. Max Moore, CEO of Alcor.
So this is the front office area. All the interesting stuff happens down here. Death is not something you should accept. It's not natural. It's not sacrosanct. Really, it's our responsibility to use our intelligence, whether you think it's from evolution or God-given, to solve this problem. Technology will keep improving, and that eventually we will have those capabilities to restore you.
Alcor was founded in 1972. Today, it has over 1,000 members.
And are these photos of actual patients?
Public patients, with quite a variety.
As we entered Alcor's facility, it began to resemble the set of a science fiction film, complete with operating rooms, surgical gear, and vast amounts of liquid nitrogen.
This is where we store all our patients. This whole area, by the way, is reinforced. We've got bulletproof glass, we've got metal plates in the walls, just to give as much protection as possible to our patients. We have 134 patients in here right now, with 4 whole bodies and several neuro patients in each one of these. We have a lot more patients coming in.
The cryonics community refers to these frozen bodies as patients, because according to them, they're not really dead. They're in suspended animation, waiting to be revived.
Why cryonics, or why should someone have it done to themselves?
My fundamental reason for wanting to do cryonics, if all else fails, is that I like living, and I see no reason to accept an arbitrary limit to that. Cryonics is an extension of emergency medicine, the way I see it. It's people who stop breathing, their heart stop beating. When you've done the best you can, there's nothing more you can do with today's medical technology. Give them to us. We're going to protect their cells as well as we can and just drop them to a very, very low temperature. They can wait then for decades or even centuries if necessary until technology has reached a level where it can repair the damage done to them by the aging process, by the disease itself, and by the cryonics process.
I met Aaron Drake, Alcor's medical response director, who explained to us how this operation works.
How many times have you done this procedure?
Alcor's done this 134 times. I've been involved in 49 of them.
And this is where it would happen, right?
Right here.
The body would be right in there.
Yeah.
Could I go inside of that container?
You could.
All right, let's get into this thing. Oh.
There you go. That's not so bad.
As Aaron secured the lid, I gained a first-hand view of an Alcor patient.
Don't do that.
The guiding principle of the preservation process is called vitrification, a procedure intended to prevent our bodies from freezing and our cells from crystallizing.
You do a conventional surgical procedure called a thoracotomy, where we basically open up the chest, access the heart, and use the body's plumbing, the arteries, the veins, to not only remove the blood out of the vascular system, but all the fluids of the body. We're gonna flush in a medical-grade antifreeze. Our bodies are maybe 60 to 70% water. If that went below the freezing temperature, it would freeze, it would crystallize.
That's what destroys the cells.
It destroys cells.
Y'all are gonna kill me, and I'm your next cryo experiment.
Finally, the patient is immersed in a liquid nitrogen tank at minus 380 degrees Fahrenheit, where they await their theoretical resurrection.
So right now, we can do the first part, we can minimize the damage, we can keep improving that process, but we don't know a whole lot about the revival end.
There is a lingering question.
You made it.
I made it.
And you're resuscitated.
I'm resuscitated.
What will it take to revive these human popsicles? No one seems to know exactly, but the possibilities are exciting to think about.
What we do know is we're making progress already. Regeneration of tissues, growing organs, that's very relevant to cryonics.
The most likely scenarios involve advanced bioengineering and nanotechnology.
We can certainly envision nanoscopic repair devices that can go into cells, and those are on the drawing board. It doesn't violate any laws of physics. We just can't build them right now because they're very tiny devices.
These are treatments using nanorobots and synthetic enzymes that can fix and regenerate tissues, literally coding and reprinting new DNA to help create healthy cells.
The enzyme then cuts the plasmid at this specific point, allowing a new piece of DNA to be inserted.
Reanimating a cryopreserved body requires not just the repair of vitrified tissue, but also the healing of whatever illness or condition contributed to the patient's death in the first place. Malignant tumors, diseased arteries, dementia. Cryonicists are counting on cures for these kinds of illnesses before they attempt to revive their patients.
How long do you think it's gonna be? What's your bet? What's your ballpark?
Everybody wants to know, when will patients come back? There really can't be an answer to that question for a couple of reasons, and I'll just give a very fuzzy answer, okay? I'll say it could be between 30 years, extremely unlikely, and 150 years. Now, there really isn't an answer because different patients will come back at different times. Patients preserved with earlier technologies and techniques will, on average, have received less quality treatment. There'll be more damage to their cells. It'll take more repair. We can show we are preserving tissue very effectively, and it seems no reason why patients won't be revivable at some point in the future.
One must also consider the finances of living in one of Alcor's stainless steel capsules. Despite Dr. Max Moore's confidence, the mystery of patient revival will remain for quite some time.
So if I walk through this door, tomorrow, say I want to do this, how much does it cost me?
If you just want to preserve the brain, it's a minimum of $80,000 for everything. For the whole body, it's $200,000 minimum. People get to choose whether public or private, but for instance, one well-known case, we have Kim Swosey, who was a young woman of 23, who had a glioblastoma, very aggressive brain cancer. We have, I think, a 101-year-old patient in here. It's about our oldest right now. We have Ted Williams, which was supposed to be private back in the day, but since everybody knows that now, yes, we have Ted Williams. He's probably our most famous patient currently.
Resting at a comfortable minus 300.
Yeah. Last year in 2014, we did 13 cases, and that was the largest number we've ever had. Our medical response director keeps a watch list, basically, of members who we know have serious medical problems, who are terminal or simply very, very old. and he keeps tabs on those. And that's one reason that we've had a very high level of success at being at the bedside at the point of clinical death, something like 85% of cases.
Alcor can also provide its members with cryopreservation of their pets, offering them the chance to be reunited with their furry friends.
And if it works, that's a pretty remarkable future, and one I would certainly come back for.
These are these people's right. This is to choose. Here they're donating their body to science. People do that all the time. This is just to a particular science project. Might benefit them in the long run.
What does a future without certain death or terminal disease even look like? Is this an honest take on tomorrow, or is it too good to be true? Will these patients ever awaken, or are they destined to remain vitrified indefinitely? Despite the beautiful possibilities my new cryonicist friends explained to me, I was starting to feel a bit skeptical of their frozen utopian dreams.
Hey, welcome to the Skeptics. Nice to meet you.
Michael Shermer is the founder of Skeptic magazine, where he investigates what he considers the more dubious claims by scientific researchers and organizations around the world.
My skeptical alarm goes off when I hear it. It sounds too much like religion. Cryonics is kind of like a scientific search for immortality. I did one on cryonics. Can science cheat death?
But do you think it's possible? They're very upfront saying, look, we can't reanimate yet. But in 100 years, we probably will be able to. Do you think that's wishful thinking?
Today, the idea of reanimating heads or bodies in a century or 2 or 5 is wishful thinking, because we don't even know if in principle how you could reanimate a brain. We know roughly where memories are stored and kind of how they're stored, but we still don't know the basis of consciousness. We're going to conquer the technology of bringing it back after it's gone. That's wishful thinking at the moment. Probabilities are so slim that you're better off focusing on something like, just cure heart disease or cancer or something like that. Extend the quality of life into the 90s, 100. That has a better hope. It's not just me. I mean, most scientists are skeptical of cryonics.
Now we're in Boston to talk to some scientists who research extreme temperatures. We're going to talk to them about cryonics.
We look at the effect of freezing and different types of freezing on cells, tissues. How it happens is fundamental whether or not a tissue or a cell will survive the freezing process. I'm a cryobiologist. I have worked on this problem for 32 years.
Could you explain to me what happens when you freeze an organ?
80% of human cells are mostly water. So when you bring water below freezing temperature, 0 degree, ice forms, and that's damaging. So to prevent ice formation, what we do is we add lots of other things into the cells that basically prevents water molecules to find each other to form ice.
Dr. Toner is a leading expert in cryoprotectants, substances engineering to act at a cellular level to deter formation of ice. Cryoprotectants aren't just for scientists. Some Arctic fish and frogs have proteins that protect them from extreme cold. Antifreeze is used in cars and to de-ice airplane wings. What Dr. Toner can show us is that preserving human tissue, a few cells at a time, is possible. However, preserving the whole biological human structure of the whole human body is extremely difficult.
What about it doesn't work?
There are many things that doesn't work with the idea of freezing a whole head. Number one, you can only slowly freeze and slowly warm large things. Ice is going to form inevitably during warming.
Not only does the cooling effect wreak havoc on cells, but the warming process also causes stress and fractures as the tissue undergoes a dynamic shift.
This is our lab benches where we do most of our experiments.
We're trying to optimize various types of cryoprotectants. So this is a combination of 2 commonly used cryoprotectants. So let's plunge it into liquid nitrogen.
Something is being simmered.
Yeah. So now it's completely cooled. And when I bring it up, you can see this really nice glass, this clear that's formed. And then as it's warming, now you can start to see that transition into more of an opaque.
It's ice.
It's ice forming, exactly.
Even this tiny small sample, which is a tiny fraction of the whole human head, and ice is inevitably will form in it.
What did it prove or disprove if we're referring to it in terms of cryonics?
What we showed was that even in a small volume, you get this recrystallization that happens, and that sort of propagates really quickly through the solution and essentially just kills cells.
So mushy brain.
So mushy brain, yeah.
The human body has over 100 cell types, each with a different structure and function from one organ or tissue to the next. A one-size-fits-all solution means that a cryoprotectant will be effective across the entire range of cell types. Currently, this is not considered possible because the chemicals might protect one cell type and may damage everything else. Therefore, cryopreserving the cells of just a kidney might work. But if you want to preserve a body or a head, cryopreservation becomes exponentially difficult.
So if we take a look at them, what we see is they're nice spherical cells. So we have maybe a 90 to 95% survival rate, which is pretty good. Now, if we look at the other cell line, treated exactly the same way, things look a little different. Most of the cells look pretty beaten up.
This is a very complex problem. And they make it sound like, oh, if you vitrify, everything would survive. That's not true. All they say is one day it's possible. They just take people's heads and freeze it. The chances that you will bring the frozen head back is the same as when you go home tonight, open the freezer, get the ground beef out, and make a cow out of it. So the chances of getting that head back with intact memory is a ridiculous concept. And when you do that, please call me. I want to see it.
Cryonics is beginning to gain traction, but it's still faced with many questions. Can reanimation and ultimately an unlimited lifespan be achieved? What if these companies go bankrupt before the proposed technology becomes available? Not to mention society's traditional outlooks on life and death. Regardless, a small group of forward-thinking individuals still believe they can overcome mortality.
Does it bother you that people have so much skepticism towards it?
Yeah, it does. It's emotionally difficult to be in a profession that everybody is so skeptical of. So I work through it. I deal with it.
But you really believe in it?
Oh, yeah.
As I met more people involved with cryonics, I began to see how it was a deeply personal thing. It was a way for people to work through their fears, to be part of a community. Matthew Sullivan has been in the cryonics business for over 12 years, helping to cryopreserve over 40 people.
9:53 a.m.
If anything goes wrong, I think that you feel it personally, because you realize that could be you, or it could be somebody that you love.
And you've handled loved ones before?
Yes, my father.
Your father?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
It was empowering in the sense of, giving my dad a second chance.
So did you have your dad's brain in your hands?
Yeah, I actually did physically hold my father's brain in my hands.
Knowing that I could at least try to save his life, even if the chance was 1%, it gives me a sense of feeling that, I tried to do something and there is a chance, even if it is a long shot.
Are you married?
Yeah.
How does your wife feel about this?
She doesn't agree with me. So, but I mean, most people don't. I've tried to convince each of my grandparents as they've one at a time said no and died on me.
Do you have kids?
Yeah.
Do you want them to be chronically preserved?
Well, of course I do, but that'll be their decision when the time comes. They'll get older and make up their own minds.
Another dedicated cryonicist who's worked at Oregon Cryonics is the groundskeeper, Matthew Deutsch.
I found out about the field when I was 15 and looking up documentaries on life extension. And then when I was 16, I came across an event, a meeting for young cryonics enthusiasts. The concept of no longer existing terrifies me. I don't want to just go to sleep and not wake up. I want to actually have a good chance at reanimation and just continuing my existence. When I went to the Singularity Summit, and I just hit me. Cryonics musical. Cryonics Cryonics is cool. Cryonics is cool. Don't be a fool. Hop in a pool of LN2, and I'll see you. I'll see you in the future. I'll see you in the future.
Bravo.
A dear friend of his was one of the first patients to be cryopreserved at the facility.
She had a neural vitrification on May 6th, 2014.
You do have a friend in here, correct?
Yes, my childhood dog, Cupcake. She was in terminal condition when I was offered employment here.
Do you ever walk by the canister holding her and like speak to her?
Sometimes I go there and have lunch by the canister.
When I was holding the frozen preserved brain of a dog named Cupcake, I realized how important cryonics is as a belief system that helps people cope with their loss and mortality. One based on science rather than visions of heaven or hell. The science questions I have about vitrification and memory are important, but what about the fear of death? They get close to their loved ones, touching their brains as their fears are calmed. Matthew was so moved by the plight of his furry friend that he composed what he called a Cryonics rock opera.
Everyone tells me she'll always live in my heart, but I know better. Death is just the start.
Are you really afraid of death?
Yeah, I am afraid of death in all ways, and I will never give up. I think it makes my life safer. I behave a little differently than most people because I'm thinking about that all the time. I just want to yell at the entire world, why don't you get it? You're going to die. Here's an option, the only option.
So what do you think it's going to be like when someone actually emerges and is reanimated? What do you think that moment will look like?
This is a grand experiment. I didn't know if it was going to work, but I made it. I think it would be a fantastic feeling.
What I like about cryonics is, again, I'm a scientist. I love the imagination, and that part I like. So I've spent 33 years of my day in, day out on thinking about how to freeze things, and I know it's not going to work. Cryonics companies do come and go, and we'll see if we stand the test of time and make it a respectable profession.